When a wildfire sparks, our attention goes right to the firefighters, the planes, and all that smoke. But what if the real battle, the one that truly matters, is happening years before, on a spreadsheet? We're about to dive into this high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar race to stop utility-sparked wildfires before they even have a chance to start. And trust me, you might be surprised by which solution actually comes out on top. Okay, so this map right here lays out the problem perfectly. All those colored areas, those are California's high fire threat districts. Now look at the red dots. Every single one of those is a fire started by a PG&E power line between 2014 and 2022. You can just see how the grid, the very thing that powers our lives, is woven directly through the most dangerous landscapes. It turns thousands of miles of wire into a potential fuse. So to fix this, California's major utilities have proposed spending a staggering amount of money. We are talking $9 billion every single year. And that cost? It gets passed on to millions of us through our electricity bills. So the pressure to spend it wisely is absolutely immense. And that brings us to the crucial question, right? If you've got $9 billion, where do you put it to get the biggest bang for your buck, the biggest reduction in fire risk? Do you build a fortress? Do you hire a massive gardening crew? Or do you just flip a switch? Well, it turns out there are really three main strategies on the table. And I think a great way to think of them is as three different fighters in the ring: the fortress, the gardener, and the circuit breaker. First up, we have the fortress. This is the brute force approach, Just take the power lines out of the air entirely and bury them deep underground. Once a line is buried, the risk of it starting a fire drops to pretty much zero. It's a permanent, super powerful solution. But yeah, building a fortress is incredibly expensive. PG&E projects that by 2026, it's going to cost $2.8 million to bury just a single mile of power lines. And when you have tens of thousands of miles of these lines in high-risk areas, well, the math gets terrifying really fast. All right, next up, we've got the gardener. This strategy is all about aggressively clearing any and all vegetation. We're talking trees, branches, shrubs, anything within 12 feet of a power line. It is a constant, never-ending battle with nature to keep those lines clear. And this is why the gardener is so important. A tree branch hitting a power line only causes about 1 in 5 ignitions. But get this, those same ignitions are responsible for a mind-blowing 98% of all the acres burned by utility fires. These are the sparks that become absolute infernos. And finally, our third contender, the circuit breaker. This is the tech-savvy, nimble approach. Instead of rebuilding the entire grid or clearing massive amounts of forest, this strategy uses the equipment that's already there, just in a new, much smarter way. So, how does it work? Well, when something like a tree branch hits a power line, it creates a surge of electricity. That's called a fault, and that fault can create a deadly spark. Fast trip settings basically make the circuit breakers on the line hypersensitive. They shut off the power in a fraction of a second when they detect a fault, hopefully before a spark can even think about forming. And the results? The data is just stunning. According to the research, simply enabling these fast trip settings on a high-risk day reduces the probability of an ignition by an average of 72%. Now, it's not perfect, but that is a massive risk reduction. Okay, so we have our three contenders: the expensive but permanent fortress, the crucial but constant gardener, and the cheap but imperfect circuit breaker. Now, it is time to put them head-to-head. Let's go right back to our $9 billion question. Where do you get the most prevented ignitions for your buck? And the answer is pretty darn clear. This chart shows the cost to prevent a single ignition using each method. Look at the bar on the far left for fast trip settings. It's tiny. Now compare that to the cost of undergrounding, or the even higher costs of enhanced vegetation management. The difference is staggering. It's not even close. The tech-based, low-capital circuit breaker approach is overwhelmingly the most cost-effective. So, here's the crucial takeaway. The most innovative and cheapest solution to deploy actually delivered the best results for the money. It completely upends that old idea that you have to spend the most to solve the biggest problems. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. This isn't just about picking one winner and calling it a day. The arrival of a tool that's as powerful and cheap as Fast Trip, well, it changes the entire strategy for building a safer, more resilient grid. What this new technology does is fundamentally alter the math. It forces us to reevaluate all of those massive multi-million-dollar per-mile projects, and the implications of that are huge. Take a look at this graph. It shows how many fires you can expect based on how many miles of power lines you bury. That solid black line, that's the old way, just burying lines. To hit a certain safety target, you might have to bury 10,000 miles of wire. But now look at the dotted line. That shows what happens with fast trip settings active. To hit that exact same safety target, you now only need to bury a few thousand miles. You get the same outcome while saving billions and billions of dollars. So this is the fundamental trade-off we're looking at. Undergrounding is slow, it's incredibly expensive, but it's 100% effective wherever you do it. Fast Trip, on the other hand, is instant, it's cheap, and you can deploy it everywhere. But it's not a perfect solution, and this is key. It causes more power outages, which has its own real costs for customers. So the choice isn't simple, but now the options are a heck of a lot clearer. And zooming out even further, the author of this research makes a really critical point. A utility can do everything right, but if communities aren't clearing brush around their own homes or building with fire-resistant materials, the risk is still high. A safe grid requires a safe community, and a safe community requires a safe grid. It is all connected. Which leaves all of us with this final thought. We are asking our electric grid to do more than it has ever done before, power our cars, our homes, our entire economy. So the challenge of our time is figuring out how to manage that massive transition so that the grid is not just clean, but also safe from threats like wildfire, affordable for everyone, and reliable enough to depend on every single day. The answer, it seems, lies not just in concrete and steel, but in smart data and even smarter switches.